1970s. And after, when that was going on, the Rehab Act of 1973 was signed. It was very significant in that the wording of it was a direct lift from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Said no otherwise, when they used the term handicapped person at that point, no otherwise handicapped person will be subject to discrimination under or denied the benefits of or denied access to any program or activity by the United States government. And that was very significant. It was a direct concession to the growing disability rights movement. But they sat on the regulations. Nixon sat on the regulations. He was impeached. Ford sat on the regulations, and Carter sat on the regulations until in 1977 there was the longest occupation of a federal building that was still used. I mean, excluding the native retaking of Alcatraz. That had happened in the San Francisco Health, Education, and Welfare Office was occupied for more than just about 28 days in 1977. He ended up, winning an agreement by the HEW secretary, Carter's HEW secretary at the time, to enact the regulations. So the struggle but the significant part of that struggle was the active solidarity of unions and of community organizations in supporting in support demonstrations outside of the occupation, and in keeping supply lines open to the occupants during the sit-in, and making sure that food got in, messages got out, all that type of stuff. Very significant was what happened then is there was still at that time in Oakland a Black Panther Party. Even though the PPP had been pretty much decimated by by the COINTELPRO, by a lot of its leadership was in prison, murdered, or in exile. Huey was still in jail at that time, but the Panthers in Oakland were very significant in the occupation in that they helped provide food for the sit-in of the occupants, and they kept the supply lines open while the occupation, and that was very much anyway, that was 1979, and that would be okay. Around the same time, there was a very active ex-patient and psychiatric survivor movement that was starting up. Significantly among that nationally was the Network Against Psychiatric Assault, and there was a sister organization of ours in Boston called the Mental Patients Liberation Front, of whom there were two national leaders, Judy Chamberlain and David Oakes. There were people that they organized pickets of the pharmaceutical companies and the American Psychiatric Association, and they had kept, it was the start of a growing movement that has its root, in which the peer and the peer survivor movement has its roots in today. There was ongoing struggles for accessible public transportation when ADAPT was a national organization that started in the early 1980s. They had first started, picture about 40, 50 people in power chairs surrounding inaccessible buses, and getting other people to basically setting up a picket line around accessible buses, and drawing people's attention to that, and just doing direct actions and occupations around the American Public Transit Association, the industry leaders that do the design of rolling stock on buses and subways and trains and such. And they had gotten some significant concessions in terms of rewriting some of the access regulations. And then in the late 80s and early 90s, they had changed their emphasis to work on issues of personal assistance services and other things that folks would need to stay in their homes. A personal assistant is someone who someone would hire, and the state Medicaid agency would pay to provide whatever assistance that the person would need, whether it be just daily living, just like getting up in the morning, getting ready for bed at night, taking a shower, and basic stuff that is not medical, that is not medicalized, and that people need in order to get out of nursing homes and other facilities that are making profits off people's needs. So ADAPT has been doing that and doing successful direct actions around that, those issues, and raising them. It brings us, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. There are some significant developments that happened behind the scenes around that. A lot of the reactionary forces that tried to stop the momentum behind it, or whatever, tried to use fear tried to whip up hysteria around people with AIDS. And one of the things that they tried to do was to add draconian restrictions on food service workers. That was the likes of Jesse Helms and some of the other people who are these outright bigots who just do what they normally do. But people were organized to fight that, and people there were. Well, it's important to remember that the ADA was, like any pieces of legislation, are reflections of where the class struggle is at any particular time. It's not, it's a reflection of, at that particular time, it was, they made some significant concessions, but also they whittled away at some of them, like in terms of employment, and they pretty much gutted the employment title of it. But one of the most significant movements that has taken place in the starting in the early 80s was ACT UP. And ACT UP, of course, was the organization of people with AIDS and HIV who organized for the availability of the first drugs. I don't know if comments who were around remember that when AZT first came out, the price of it was astronomical. And when the first retrovirals came out, they were astronomical too. No insurance would cover them. Folks from ACT UP they would take over. They did a lot of very successful direct actions at Glaxo, which is now Glaxo Wellcome. That one of the developers of AZT, in terms of demanding that they lower the prices of these drugs that keep people alive, rather than gouge profits and cost people's lives. I'm getting to, in where are we now? Around the 1990s, there were organizing, confronting the nauseating mass media portrayals of people with disabilities, especially in the whole Jerry's Kids muscular dystrophy telethon thing. And there was a group in Chicago calling themselves Jerry's Orphans, who organized picket lines outside of media outlets that showed these telethons that were they were media spectacles that were they basically presented the bourgeois view of charity and not solidarity. Charity meaning somebody up here tossing a couple of pennies or crumbs to somebody down here who they see is worthy, or if they don't see him as worthy, they don't toss any crumbs at him. You know, and people, you know, have been organizing around these perceptions, well, way before then, but that is when it was becoming able to get more visible.